For 100 days, I simulated a living, breathing, deadly dinosaur ecosystem. In these lands live some of the largest creatures to ever walk the earth, from towering sauropods to giant carnivores, and even the weird and wonderful that inhabited our earth over 66 million years ago. For the next 100 days, witness history, as titanic rivalries are born, heartbreaking stories are told, and every single dinosaur species battles for its survival. But the question is, who can make it? Or are they all doomed to die? Well, to find out, it's time to go back to day one. The very first thing we would do is create the island for our ecosystem, where our dinosaurs can survive, thrive, and breed. Now, of course, this feature is exclusive to the brand new Jurassic World Evolution 3, and if you do want to purchase Evolution 3 yourself, check out my exclusive link in the description. Every purchase does help support the channel. I did a quick exploration of the island I created, and found a lake beneath an escarpment. After placing down a hatchery, I went to the immediate area to make sure there was plenty of water, both shallow and deep. The first dinosaurs to be introduced to the ecosystem were a herd of Velociraptors. Living in the late Cretaceous and known for their unique colourful frills, these large ceratopsids lived in what is modern-day Montana. However, upon their release, they did immediately notify me that they weren't too happy with their surroundings. But you see, I didn't notice it first, as I was too busy logging into Raid Shadow Legends to unlock Michelangelo. That's right, Raid have partnered with Paramount, and your favourite ninja fighting turtles have made it into the game. This was a nostalgic blast from the past for me, and my reaction to seeing this video announcing the collab was something like this. Being able to use these legendary turtles in-game really did bring back some of my favourite childhood memories. It doesn't surprise me though that Raid have been able to add them into the game, as since I first started playing Raid in 2022, they have added an endless amount of content, and are continuing to do so, which just makes for endless replayability. By logging in for 7 days, you will automatically kick off your collection with Michelangelo, and the rest of the gang are also here, meaning Donatello, Leonardo, Raphael, April and Shredder are also all available to unlock. My personal favourite is Raphael, by the way, but you guys can choose whoever you like. As always when we talk about Raid on this channel, I have to promote the Rampy Army clan. After downloading Raid, head on over to the clan page and come and join us, but be quick as we do only have limited spaces left in the clan. You can download Raid by either scanning the QR code on screen now, or clicking the link in the description below. And by using my link, you will get 2 free epic champions, including the epic Tagoar and epic Fayne, who is unlocked when you reach level 15. And on top of that, you can use one of the 6 promo codes, Tree Hugger, Get Alice, Desert Queen, Monkey King, Demon Slayer, or UD King, to get yourself a legendary champion of your choice. I would personally recommend using the code UD King, and get yourself a legendary Ultimate Death Knight, because come on, who doesn't want that? Thank you so much to the folks at Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video and supporting the channel. Right, back to it. After releasing the Velociraptors, I made sure the environment was suitable and acclimatized for them by adding in a bit of shrubbery. And it wasn't long before they were comfortable in their new territory. Though there is always trouble in paradise, as there was already a challenger for the position of herd leader. After the stabbing of horns and the clashing of frills, a clear winner had been decided. But in this ecosystem, it wouldn't just be enough for the Velociraptors population to remain steady. For the species to survive, it was vital that it could breed and repopulate. A suitably sized nest was placed in their territory, hidden away and covered by the shadows of the trees, and one day, hopefully new life will emerge from the nest. It's also important for any ecosystem to have diversity, and it was time for the second species to be introduced, the Acrocanthosaurus. Like the Velociraptors, these helmeted lizards were also found in western North America and lived in the late Cretaceous period. And this herd of hadrosaurs would certainly feel right at home alongside ceratopsids. Joining our party of late Cretaceous North American herbivores in the biome was a group of Stygimolochs. Despite their fierce looks and name, these little critters were peaceful plant eaters, and a small stature complements their larger neighbours. And just as with the Velociraptors, it was vital that both the Acrocanthosaurus and the Styges had their own nests, to keep their populations flowing. Nighttime was falling onto our ecosystem, and in the night, the predators came out to play. The first carnivores to be added, airlifted in from Malta, were a pack of Utahraptors. These Canadian savage thieves were closely related to Velociraptors and were fast, intelligent hunters. A couple of meat feeders were placed all across the forest to help get the raptors settled in and to give the scavengers something to eat. And accompanying the raptors was some scavengers themselves, the Compsognathus, or compies as they are commonly known. These chicken-sized theropods were commonly found all around Europe during the late Jurassic period. It was a damp but otherwise calm first night on the island. An Atrociraptor named Terry was performing a solo scout mission, and a Stigmalock was taking a nice watery stroll through one of the lakes, while Acrocanthosaurus and Velociraptor were becoming the best of buds in the grassland. Through the night, I continued to do some more work on our island, and a new nest was placed down for the Atrociraptors, which was quickly claimed and made use of. I then added some more lakes and made sure to populate them with some fish, ready for any piscivores which may enter the ecosystem soon. As night turned to dawn, I found the first new natural arrivals of the ecosystem. A juvenile Coryphosaurus was taking its first steps after emerging from the forest. Life had truly found a way to survive, for now at least. And as the morning fell on day 3, it was time for a larger predator to be added, the Sukomimus. These crocodile mimics could reach up to 11 meters in length and were found in early Cretaceous Africa. These skinny guys were piscivores in nature, eating mainly fish, but they would turn to meat if push come to shove, and perhaps in this ecosystem, they may have to do that. Only time will tell. To suit their semi-aquatic needs, the nearby lake was made deeper in sections, and a nest was also added for them should they wish to get really comfortable. This lake was appropriately named Sukomimus Lake. Elsewhere, there was a fight for dominance between two of the Atrociraptors. Both raptors believed they had a strong case for the name of the alpha of the pack, but in classic fashion, only a true winner could be decided by fighting. After some pounces and body slams, the loser ran away in shame, meaning a clear winner had been decided, and the Atrociraptors had a new leader. In the Velociraptor's nest, 2 more eggs were discovered, meaning that soon more juveniles would be added to the ecosystem. It seemed that not every species was hell-bent on reproducing though, as these 2 Stigmalocks were more intent on fighting. On day 5, the baby Velociraptors were born, and began their very first steps into a strange, unfamiliar world. The parents were nearby, and they immediately began to feel safe, and began playing on the grass. While the babies got to feel protected in their new environment, the same could not be said for our latest addition, the Ornithomimus, who were airlifted straight into Atrociraptor territory. For the Ornithomimuses, they would have to be smart if they wanted their species to survive, and potentially look at finding some new territory right away. But in these lands, danger was set to be around every corner, as a pack of Acrocanthosaurus were transported not too far away from what had previously been the herbivore paradise. These late Jurassic carnivores became the new apex predators of the ecosystem, as they are both British and of course the largest out of the carnivores of the ecosystem, so far at least. It appeared that Christmas had come early for the Atrociraptors, as the first of the giant turkeys was hunted down and slaughtered, providing a nice, feathery meal for the plucky raptor that slayed it. Elsewhere in the ecosystem, it was time for some more landscaping, as trees needed to be added, lakes needed to be dug, and hills and waterfalls needed to be formed. The resulting oasis of all this, the Barionyx Lake. Before the first inhabitants of the lake could be added, the Acrocanthosaurus took an unusual method of deciding who the pack leader could be by conducting a staring contest. Eventually, one of them blinked, and a winner was decided. But the Velociraptors, on the other hand, took a much more old-fashioned, aggressive measure of deciding who their herd leader could be by whacking each other in the face several times. Back with the Atrociraptors, 3 Atrociraptor eggs sat within their nest, right next to the corpse of an Ornithomimus, who they will have a hefty feast on as soon as they emerge. The Atrociraptors themselves seemed well, and were fighting to the death over some minor squabble. It was though finally time for the first inhabitants of the Barionyx Lake. You'll never guess what creature we introduced. It was of course the Barionyx. These British Spinosaurids weren't quite as large as their African cousins, but they did have a strong claw in each hand to help scoop up fish, which were of course added to their lake for them to feed on. On the subject of their African cousins, the Sukomimuses were absolutely thriving at their own lake, and even had their own nest, where 5 eggs were laying in the dirt, ready to incubate in a number of days. To celebrate the happy couple, they were given the names of Gavin and Stacy. In the night, new life was arriving in the ecosystem. The trio of Atrociraptor babies emerged from their eggs and explored their new environment. The first thing they discovered, their tails and each other. But it was to be said, their parents were nowhere to be seen. How absolutely irresponsible. After living there for a day, the Baryonyxes were now fully ingrained into their new lake, taking a nice swim and walking along the craggy shoreline between the waterfalls, not giving a single care for anything outside their territory. How very British of them. The Atrociraptors weren't the only species though who were adding to their numbers, as the Coryphosaurs welcomed more of their own into their herd, a perfect snack for the Acrocanthosaurus. And over in the Sukomimus Lake, the 5 newborn Sukos were taking their first strides towards the lake, where they will soon spend most of their life. Let's hope this lake has enough fish to feed that many hungry mouths. The parent Sukomimuses seemed to already be regretting their life choices and had collapsed in complete exhaustion. Rain was now falling all across the island, but the additions to the ecosystem were not slowing down. The latest dinosaurs to enter the herbivore territory were the Ankylosaurs. These heavily armoured tanks lived in the late Cretaceous in North America and boasted a beefy tail club that was used for defence. There is truly nothing that these guys love to do more than breaking shins with that thing. The Acrocanthosaurus had finally claimed their first victim, and sadly it was a baby Velociraptor that was killed, leaving behind a broken family and parents that would surely be out for revenge. The villain Metricanthosaur himself was standing in the lake in the rain and couldn't seem to care any less. Rather than navigate themselves to some new safer territory, the Ornithomimuses seem to have adopted a strange approach by lying down and resting firmly in the knowledge that they were at the centre of a Triceratops territory. Were they just fed up with life, or were they just incredibly brave? Maybe both, but overall, it seemed that the dinosaurs weren't badly impacted by the rain, with the baby Utahraptors and Sukomimuses seeming fine with it. However, the Sukomimuses were not impressed with the lack of sand in their environment, and especially given their population had multiplied with the newborns, I made sure to add some more sand to keep them happy. It also seemed that every living being in the herbivore territory was unhappy with something or the other, so I did some landscaping to try and appease them all. Over by the Utahraptor nest, 3 more babies hatched out of their eggs and began exploring for the first time. And once again, the first points of interest were their tails. To deal with the ever-increasing and spiralling Utahraptor numbers, a group of Allosaurs were introduced to the territory. These pack hunters were the top predators of their time in late Jurassic North America. The first thing they did was decide on a pack leader. For some reason, they didn't use the Metricanthosaurus staring contests, instead decided to body slam and bite into each other. A pack leader was decided, and the female was named Sally, so they could get to work. They were immediately unhappy, however, as they weren't particularly keen on sharing their territory with the Velociraptors. Well, there is a clear and obvious way to solve that problem. Things were speeding up in the ecosystem now, and blood was shed with a Metricanthosaur taking down a Velociraptor, and then an Utahraptor taking down another Ornithomimus. Whereas a nest was also claimed by a Stigmaloch, while another nest gave life to 3 new Metricanthosaurs in the pouring rain. And to provide food for the babies, an adult Metri killed the Stigmaloch, only after tasting the meal first to see if it was safe to eat. Back in the Sukomimus lake, things were looking a little bit too chummy and friendly for my liking, so it was time to add a little bit of chaos and another African Spinosaurid, the Spinosaurus itself. A proper Spinosaurus this time, none of this half-fish nonsense, and this Spino was named Nokia, as she does have a reputation of swallowing old mobile phones. Nokia was immediately dissatisfied with her new environment, given it was called Sukomimus Lake and not Spinosaurus Lake. I did make attempts to appease her needs as best as I could, but it still wasn't happy sharing the territory with the Sukomimuses. Over in the herbivore territory, something unknown was spooking the Metricanthosaurs. Perhaps they saw a ghost or something. And at the Barionyx lake, twin Baryonyxes were born, and like the Utahraptors, the first thing they did upon hatching was attack their tails. More trees were added around the lake to provide them with more shelter to best hide from any threats. The Metricanthosaurs seemed to have calmed down from their paranormal experiences and were now back wandering around harmlessly once more. And now at the Great Valley, some new additions were arriving. The Stegosaurs. These roof lizards lived in the Jurassic North America and are iconic because of the plates on the back and the phagomizers on their tail. With the growing number of Metricanthosaurs threatening to run riot, the Stegosaurs were brought in to bring a bit of order to this place and hopefully take out a couple of the Metricanthosaurs in the process. And speaking of the Metricanthosaurs, their population increased once again, as 4 more of the little scamps hatched from their nest later that day, and their population was now seriously spiralling out of control. And on the topic of populations now out of control, the ever-increasing number of Velociraptors meant that there were now more and more raptors vying to be top dog of the pack, with constant infighting between them. There was more fighting in the Great Valley as the Stegosaurs began to defend their territory against their greatest threats, the Ankylosaurs. It appeared that the Stegosaurs hadn't quite read the room and were now trying to get rid of the Ankylosaurs from the territory instead of the Metricanthosaurs. It was now time though for the addition of more carnivores, these ones being a little bit more unique, the Dimetrodon. These quadrupeds lived in the Permian era and liked to hunt small reptiles in swamplands, though they might struggle for that in the Great Valley. Nokia the Spinosaur had probably rather sensibly decided to leave Sukomimus Lake for now, as she was heavily outnumbered. But one of the Allosaurs had got too close to the nests for the raptors' liking, and a pair of them pounced, latching themselves on to the larger beast. They managed to topple over the Allosaur twice, but tragically, just as it looked like they were getting the upper hand, one of the raptors died after getting too close to the Allo's teeth. The defense failed and the floodgates opened, allowing another Allosaur to charge into the territory. The victorious Allosaur rested in its victory, while the other one was forced to rest in defeat and nurse a minor fracture that it had picked up from the fight. Over at the Great Valley, the Ankylosaurs and Stegosaurs were continuing to have disagreements about food supplies, but after one brutal Thagomizer slash, the Ankylosaur went down. The victorious Stegosaur was named Killer and was relishing in the fact that it now had all the plants to eat itself. Away from the Great Valley, construction had begun on a new waterfall. Starting off with the construction of the cliffs and then adding in some lakes, it was quickly appreciated by both the Allosaurs and the Triceratops, who had come to some sort of temporary truce to enjoy their new oasis. It seems that this old adage is true, that waterfalls bring everyone together, but how long will this one last? It was time to construct a new area of the ecosystem now though, the meadows. And the first dinosaur to be added here were the small ceratopsids, Styracosaurus. These spiked lizards have many spikes on their crest, a long singular horn above their noses, and like to travel in large herds. But they weren't the only new life in the ecosystem. In the Great Valley, 5 new stigma-locked babies had just been born. Helpful additions as well, as the Acrocanthosaurus had been hunting down the adults. The first thing the babies did though was get their first ever meal, as they pecked the grass outside of their nest. Back in the meadows, the largest dinosaur yet was being introduced to the ecosystem, the Dreadnoughtus. Estimated to grow over 26 meters in length and weighing over 60 tons, this South American sauropod was a true behemoth, even amongst dinosaurs. It was necessary that the meadows contain the appropriate foods, given this beast's enormous needs. From the largest sauropod now to the tiniest of babies, as some young compies had hatched from their eggs and took their first bounces into the wider world. No doubt they would be desperate to be reunited with their parents before they became an appetizer or stepped on by something by accident. Rain was now falling in the meadow, but there was no reason to stop the new arrivals. Introducing the Spinosaurus. These Chinese ceratopsids are recognisable for the holes in their frill and their short single-nosed horn. They like to eat ferns and low vegetation, but will they compete with the Styracosaurus for food, or will they cohabit peacefully? I guess we'll soon find out. But the meadows really also needed some predators to keep the herbivore population in check, and so it was time for the Utahraptors to arrive. These raptors were among the largest of the Dromaeosaur species, and when hunting in packs, were dangerous to nearly everything living in the area. It was clear from the start that these guys did not like the rain, as they were immediately shaking out of their feathers. The truce between the Utahraptors and the Allosaurs had now ended, and the raptors were out for revenge for their fallen comrade, and began to pounce and attack the Allo once more. Unfortunately though for the Utahraptors, this siege lasted for about 5 seconds. The Allosaur managed to throw one of them off, causing a minor fracture, and managed to kill another, leaving the pack another member down. Following that, the Utahraptors rather sensibly decided not to attack again. Next to be added were a pack of Herbivores. These 4-meter long South Americans were one of the earliest known theropod dinosaurs to ever walk the earth. With a mix of their speed, sharp teeth and claws, they are certainly capable hunters and perhaps ones to watch out for in this ecosystem. Over at Sukomimus Lake, things were surprisingly peaceful. Nokia the Spinosaurus and the Sukomimuses were living happily together. Nokia even took on the babysitting duties for a juvenile Suko, even teaching it how to swim. How wholesome. Nokia did kill 2 birds with 1 stone though, by fishing in the lake while the baby swam. The Utahraptors were now fully fed up with the Allosaurs in their territory, and another 2 began an attack strategy. Unfortunately, this battle plan must have been the brainchild of Mr. Bean, as the raptors were repeatedly flung off and sent unceremoniously, flying. Eventually the Allosaur did manage to kill the first raptor, and not long after, the second raptor. Taking a well-deserved rest from its victory, this Allosaur was named Mean Machine. One of the Dimetrodons had died in a fight with a Acrocanthosaurus. That wasn't very smart of it, was it? The Metri chose though not to eat the corpse, as it likely was noxious, instead choosing to aura farm before leaving. The Utahraptors did get up to their first actions in the meadows, taking on a lone Styracosaurus. The fight was relatively even, with the Styraco taking a couple of clawed pounces before getting back a hit of its own. The Utahraptor did not give up though, and eventually its tenacity paid off. The Styraco took one too many beatings for it to survive. In one raptor's failure came another one's defeat, as it was the Styraco though who claimed a victory in a simultaneous duel in the lake, making the raptor flee for its life. While chaos was happening in the meadows, Sukomimus Lake was the most peaceful place in the universe. Nokia the Spinosaurus didn't seem to have a single aggressive bone in her body, and was more than content to just relax with her smaller cousins. The circle of life was well underway in the Great Valley, as this Velociraptor, one of the first newborns on the island, was now fully grown, and had developed into a magnificent beast. It looked like it even developed a nurturing side to it, becoming a temporary guardian to this Metriacanthosaur until it decided to run away in fear as the baby chased it across the lake. Sometimes looks can be deceiving. After high expectations and following their lack of progress and dominion over the ecosystem, one of the Dimetrodons showed no confidence in its current leader and challenged it to a fight. The battle of the quadrupeds looks more humorous than serious, as these two synapsids exchanged 2 hits apiece before one of them ran away and the winner and leader was declared. Did the same leader retain its title, or did the challenger claim it? I honestly have no idea. Whatever the outcome of the fight, it certainly seemed to have a positive effect on the confidence and morale of the rest of the Dimetrodons. One of the little rascals decided to take on a fully grown Velociraptor. Showing no fear whatsoever, it charged forward and slammed its entire frame into the larger dinosaur, managing to kill it in 1 hit. I'm not sure any of us expected it to do that. Following this incredibly impressive performance, I decided to name it the Beast. It was now time though for another apex predator to enter the ecosystem, the Acrocanthosaurus. This absolute unit lived in early Cretaceous North America, and it is recognisable for the short sail on its back. It was named Josh in honour of the Acro that competed in our Battle Royale we did not too long ago, which you should definitely watch after you finish watching this video. Will Josh be an agent of chaos, or will he lurk in the shadows? Well, it's time to find out. As day 50 approached in our ecosystem, it had been an action-packed first half of this journey. But our Spinosaurus Nokia had so far been living peacefully with her Sukomimus cousins, but something had now changed, and the larger Spinosaurus was now squaring up to its smaller cousin for a brawl. Sukomimus smartly decided to decline this invitation, and no blood was spilled. But was this the first sign of discontent for Nokia? Over at the Great Valley, what would have been a beautiful scene of baby compies emerging from their nest for the first time was interrupted by them almost getting trampled on by a Metriacanthosaurus. The Metri was successful in its hunt, easily taking down the Hadrosaur and feasting. This Metri was now known as Mario. This poor Carnivore though wasn't the only herbivore casualty on this day. A Styracosaur had lost its life in a fight with a Utahraptor, and an Utahraptor had starved to death. Either there wasn't enough food or it had a pea-sized brain. Perhaps a bit of both. We then met up with a Barionyx, who seemed to have wandered a very long way away from Barionyx Lake. It was just seemingly standing still, taking up a threatening pose, and staring seemingly at nothing at all. So I gave it the name Wanderer and left it to it. But back at Barionyx Lake, I realised that this poor baby Barionyx had been completely abandoned by its whole family. So I named the baby Orphan. Orphan would have to do an awful lot if it wanted to survive on its own in this ecosystem. But at least in the lake, it was safe with lots of fish to eat. It seemed that the peace that had lasted for so long in Sukomimus Lake was now a thing of the past, as Nokia was now on a rampage, challenging another Suko to a duel. Surprisingly though, the Spinosaur conceded the first hit, before biting back. The Suko did get the second bite in though, before yielding the fight, realising that it wasn't doing enough damage. Unbeknown to it at the time though, but the Sukomimus that had been in the fight had received organ trauma from the Spinosaur's hit, which would almost certainly be fatal. And so its lifelong partner that they had bonded with would now be called Widow. In the Great Valley, the Stegosaurs had a fight for domination, where a new leader was decided. Figuring that the infighting may have been caused by a comfort issue with their territory, more food sources were provided to our Stegosaurs to hopefully calm them down a little bit. But violence was well and truly in the air, as 2 Metriacanthosaurs were now fighting between each other, likely over the most minor of squabbles. Josh the Acrocanthosaur did pick up his first kill of the ecosystem though, taking down a measly Styracosaur who was just there as an appetizer, as 5 seconds later he decided to go for a much bigger target, the Dreadnoughtus. For those who watched the Battle Royale video, you will know that true to form, Josh is a bit of a menace, as he likes to go for the big sauropods. After a bite at the tail and a front leg, Josh demanded that the Dread stopped and accepted defeat. When you're the size of a Dreadnoughtus though, you can afford to take a couple of bites, and he wasn't overly bothered by Josh's presence. Josh accepted this though, and decided that he would play the long game with this sauropod, and we all know that it'll be back for more. In arguably the ecosystem's fiercest rivalry so far, the Utahraptors decided to have another go at ridding the Allosaurs from their territory. After 2 previous unsuccessful attempts, the Raptors decided to go in with 3 in attack this time. After realising that their first target was just too durable to take down, they decided to switch targets midway through. This Allosaur too though was too sturdy, and was throwing off the vermin with ease. They tried again, but this time one of the raptors perished in the attack, quickly followed by a second. The Utahraptors were well and truly falling apart. Eventually the third fell, and the Allosaur rested, gloating in its victory. The juvenile Utahraptor who had witnessed the whole thing was named Loner, and he would now have to try and survive in a world without his parents or his siblings. And the environmentally conscious Allosaur made sure that the raptor corpses didn't go to waste by snacking on them. A storm was well and truly coming down on the whole island now, and it was unsettling all the dinosaurs in the ecosystem. Nokia was fighting yet another Sukomimus by the lake, and while she was once more unsuccessful in killing one of her cousins, the Suko did flee. However, in a huge turn of events, Nokia did not escape this fight unscathed, and suffered a devastating blow. The Sukomimus inflicted internal bleeding on the larger Spinosaur, and this may prove fatal for Nokia, but let's hope she can pull through. But the Darwinism award of this ecosystem has to go to the Sukomimus. This semi-aquatic dinosaur managed to die of thirst right next to a lake. That's almost humiliating as a fish drowning. The storm had now cleared up, and a new dinosaur was arriving in the meadows, the Velociraptor. This scythe lizard was a bipedal herbivore from the late Cretaceous Mongolia, and had the longest claws of any known animal in existence. It was named Big Bird, and certainly it was the word around town. Loner the Utahraptor was now all grown up, and it turned out to be not such a loner after all, as it found a partner to live and hunt with. Will they look to get revenge on the Allosaurs, or will they have learned their lesson and know not to mess with them? After watching Josh kill something in the meadows, it was time for another addition in the ecosystem, the Triceratops. These late Cretaceous herbivores travelled in herds and were amongst the most iconic of dinosaurs, easily recognisable for their three horns on their bony frills. They were airlifted into Barionyx Lake. Will the British piscivores stick to fish and coexist with the ceratopsids, or will they attempt to fight them? Right now though, they seem scared of their new neighbours, to the point that one of them had actually wandered into Sukomimus territory, whom, despite being cousins, were not at all pleased to see the smaller Spinosaurids, and they fought. Predictably, it was the smaller Barionyx who ended up fleeing once more, but now it didn't seem to have anywhere to go. With their territory being displaced, it might be the baby Baryonyxes who were affected the most. It seemed that the lesson of do not fight the Allosaurs had not been passed down to Loner and its companion, as they found themselves claw to claw with the larger beasts. Einstein described insanity as doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, and these Utahraptors were definitely as insane, as the Allosaur now easily chucked them both off its back, killing them both in the process. I think it was quite clear that the Allosaurs had won the battle with the Utahraptors. With their entire homes and lives being uprooted from beneath them, the Baryonyxes were now starting to turn on each other. Thankfully, nothing was done that they wouldn't regret, as the fight ended without bloodshed or serious injury. But meanwhile, back with Josh, our Acro, he was just doing Josh things, picking a fight against a much smaller Spinosaurus. It comes to absolutely nobody's surprise that he won the fight, but he also didn't eat it. He's simply killing for the love of the game. But it appeared that Big Bird the Ferrazino was not happy with its environment. I added some more ground leaf around its territory, which it seemed to appreciate, using its long claws to separate the leaves off a small log to eat. After spotting a sneaky Utahraptor trying to get to the Spinosaurus corpse, Josh was having none of it. After the raptor didn't heed the warning roar, Josh charged in, killing the smaller chicken in one bite. With that, Josh's total kill count is already up to 7, which is absolutely insane because he's only been here about 10 minutes. It's often said though that all great things come in pairs, and since one Acrocanthosaurus was not causing enough havoc in the ecosystem, it was time to add a second. I felt that Josh's performance in the ecosystem so far had been so stunning that he deserved a chance to find a mate, so Josh's mate was introduced to the ecosystem. But the question is, will they be Romeo and Juliet or Fred and Rose West? Most likely the latter. After finding and turning them away at first, the Sukomimuses eventually relented and let the Baryonyxes share their lake. A nice example of harmony in an ecosystem that seemed to be turning more and more bloody. Josh and his mates finally met up in the middle of the lake, but it was not the meeting that everyone had expected. Instead of working together to take down the entire meadow, they were instead at each other's throats. Surprisingly though, it was Josh who conceded the fight. The once fearless Acro was now running away, leaving his mate to be the dominant Acro of the ecosystem. With one apex added, another was removed. Nokia the Spinosaurus was found dead on the coast of Sukomimus Lake. The internal bleeding from all of her fighting had been too much for her in the end. As day was turning into night on day 60, This Sukomimus was helping its smaller cousin get rid of the Triceratops who took over their land. Despite taking a sharp horn to its skinny torso, it did manage to scare the Triceratops away, and because of this achievement, the Sukomimus was duly named Titan. Over in Green Valley, the Stegosaurs were finally getting fed up with the Metriacanthosaurs and their ever-increasing numbers. All it took was a single Thagomizer to the face for this Metri to fall, and after seeing how effective they could be, another Stegosaur found and went after a second Metri. This fight did not go smoothly though, as the Metri managed to tank some of the Stego's tail wax, even landing a couple of bites of its own. This Metriacanthosaur managed to walk away from the fight, and it was named Warrior, but it had suffered organ trauma during the fight and was unlikely to live for too much longer. In our newly named forest biome, the latest apex carnivore was hunting for anything that moved, the Giganotosaurus. This giant subbed lizard lived in modern-day Argentina. One of the largest known carnivores, it had serrated teeth and a powerful jaw, which it used to hunt even the largest of late Cretaceous sauropods. This Giga was named Bluestone and got on the prowl early, while its partner was airlifted in. Speaking of partners, Josh's mate had taken over Josh in Dreadnoughtus duties, and those duties were biting it at every possible opportunity. Though it did seem that tranquility between the Baryonyxes and the Sukomimuses was now at an end, with the two Spinosaurids now at each other's throats. It was Wanderer the Barionyx who fought the Suko, and sadly, Wanderer lost its life, after taking two unopposed bites from the larger Sukomimus. Rest in peace, Wanderer. The second Giganotosaurus and Bluestone's partner was named Rosie, a rather innocent name for something so ferocious. It's been a while though since we've had some new babies added to the ecosystem, but the wait is over as 4 young Herrerasauruses emerge from their nest. Helpfully, with no parents in sight, they're stuck on their own for a while. The poor Dreadnoughtus was still getting ganged up on by the Acros, and it must be wondering what it did to deserve being constantly chewed on by them. I named the Dreadnought Roman, but the Acro's latest attack did break one of its claws, and it was looking quite bloody now. Furious that he had lost a position of top dog in the meadows to his partner, Josh took out his anger on a lone Utahraptor, effortlessly killing it in just a single bite. But he was forced to leg it after the other dominant Acro appeared to take the corpse for its own. While the other fed, Josh was left scowling. Eventually though, he had had enough, and challenged his mates to another duel. After taking a bite and inflicting a bite of his own this time, together they did a heavy-hitting body slam, but unfortunately for Josh, he lost out once again, going 0 for 2 against someone who was supposed to be his partner. Josh once again took his rage out on a target, this time Roman, who must be living the most tortured life in this ecosystem. The numbers were really racking up in the ecosystem now, and a squadron of carnivores were airlifted into the island. These meat-eating bulls were one of the fastest known dinosaurs, given their tiny arms and sleek muscular frames. These Argentinians were easily recognisable by the distinctive horns above their eyes. In life, there are 3 certainties: death, taxes, and Roman being attacked by an Acro. Poor Roman can't even take a nice leisurely hike up the island's mountains without being followed and bitten by the Acrocanthosaurs. He must be wondering when it's going to end. Back in the meadows, Big Bird's word was that it seemed energetic and restless. Believing that it may be lonely, a second Therizinosaurus emerged from the hatchery. This one was called Kevin and would perhaps provide some much needed company for Big Bird and potentially even a mate. Unfortunately for Kevin, Josh was waiting just outside the hatchery, while his mate continued to bully the Dreadnoughtus. A fight was now about to take place between the ecosystem's longest claws and the chunkiest theropod. Kevin slashed first, scratching Josh in the face, and feeling in unbearable pain from that, Josh decided to walk away, not being able to just catch a break at the moment. What he didn't realise though, was that Kevin had also been injured from the fight, and had suffered a major injury that may be the demise of him. Life was progressing nicely in the ecosystem, and on day 65, Gavin and Stacey were watching over their young, while the Baryonyxes were slowly being removed. The construction of a second biome was underway on the island, with mass deforestation taking place before a lake was built and a waterfall could be formed. I took a quick break from my construction to see Bluestone get its first kill, taking out a helpless Stigmalock, the poor guy. At least his body went to good use though, as a light snack for the Giga. Then the Sukomimuses went back to eradicating the Baryonyxes, though this Barry put up a better fight, and the contest did end in a stalemate, with no fatalities and no clear winners. A lone Herrerasaurus wandered too close into Metriacanthosaur territory. It did put up a good account for itself, getting in 2 bites unopposed, but it had the brains to know that 1 bite from the Metri would cause serious damage, and so left the scene while it could. This plucky theropod was named Throne. Another Herrerasaur though was not so lucky, being taken down without a chance against the Carnotaur, who got their first action since arriving. The Triceratops were feeling furious in their territory, given that there was no ground fibre. Funnily enough, Barionyx Lake was not really built with that in mind, and it is their fault for taking it over. Still, for life to progress smoothly in this ecosystem, all dinosaurs would need to be as happy as possible, so suitable plant life was imported in and implanted. The leader of the Triceratops herd was named Big Mike. After already fighting Kevin, Josh had now decided to take on Big Bird, and immediately got the claws to the face. Josh fought back though, and eventually Big Bird decided to retreat. Josh roared in victory, in which was a nice boost to his confidence. The beast, never lacking in confidence of his own, squared up to another Velociraptor. This turned out to be one fight too many for the old dog though, as it lost out, being killed in one single charge by the herbivore. Rest in peace for the greatest Dimetrodon the world has ever seen. With the addition of so many larger species in the ecosystem lately, it was time for some smaller ones, the Dilophosaurus. Named after the two crests on their skulls, these spitting North American carnivores were much more likely to be scavengers than out-and-out hunters. But if they work together in a pack, anything is possible for them. Over in the meadows though, things weren't looking great for Josh. After being dominated by his partner and two failed fights against the Velociraptor, he was now starving. If he didn't find food soon, it would be over for the most prolific killer the ecosystem has seen so far. But while Josh was struggling to find food, the first major heavyweight fight of the ecosystem was now taking place in the forest. The Stegosaurus versus the Giganotosaurus. They fought in the middle of the lake and dealt a couple of blows at each other, with none of them hitting themselves too hard. In the end, the Giga fled, and the Stego held its ground. At the end of this highly anticlimactic battle, the Stegosaurus was named Unit. Bluestone, the loser of the fight, returned to Rosie, carrying a minor fracture. It appeared though that many of our carnivores were now aggressive and wanting blood. A Acrocanthosaurus got too close to the Allosaur pack, and the larger carnivores did not hesitate to try and take it out. One simple bite to the neck, and the Metri was down. Josh, however, still hadn't found food, and time was really running out for this big guy. Whereas time was seemingly infinite in the never-ending conflict between the Sukomimuses and the Barionyxes. Once more, after some back and forth, the fight ended in a draw. Evolution 4 might be out by the time this one comes to a conclusion. But there was one thing that this ecosystem was missing. A bit more rain. No, it was in fact the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Welcome to Rex Cliffs, where our new apexes have arrived, and this one the most iconic of them all. I made the cliffs more accessible and hospitable for our new monarchs, with the addition of lots of sand and more trees for cover, as well as a bit of foliage to go along with that as well. The Acrocanthosaurus numbers were now dwindling and fast. One was killed by a Stegosaurus, who were doing a mighty fine job of keeping the Great Valley safe for all herbivores. Another Metri was taken out by the Giganotosaurus, and the ecosystem's once dominant predator was now staring down the barrel of extinction. As the storm subsided over our ecosystem, we hit day 75, and it was now time to unleash a true monster on the ecosystem, the Scorpius Rex. Henry Wu's first ever hybrid. To say it was the first successful hybrid is debatable, but nevertheless it was still a huge genetic breakthrough at the time. Violent, temperamental, unpredictable, and equipped with venomous quills, the Scorpius is sure to cause imbalance on the island. For the first time since the arrival of the second Acro, Josh and his mate seem to be working together for the first time. Josh thankfully appeared to have found some food and was looking much healthier. But with the arrival of the Scorpius in their area, it was urgent now that they stick together and coordinate together for their survival. Our two new Tyrannosaurs were now adapting to their new environment. They were both named Marshall and Sue, and I'm sure their time will come for them to make their mark. The rain had begun to fall once more over the ecosystem though, creating a perfect atmosphere for an apex fight. Looking to prove himself, Josh engaged with the Scorpio. This fight would need to be a flawless performance, as Scorpios only needed one chance to sting him with its poisonous quills. Josh started the fight well with a strong bite, and after a brief stare down, he struck again. All was looking good until disaster struck. The Scorpius Rex managed to swipe its tail at the Acro, inflicting poison into its bloodstream. With its job now done, the deformed rapscallion ran away, and there was no need to continue this fight. Unfortunately for the Scorpio though, it suffered a laceration, and with Josh already having done a lot of damage, this may prove fatal. The Scorpio itself was named Shocker, but how much longer Shocker was due to be around remained to be seen. While Josh was slowly losing health from the blood poisoning, his future was also in doubt. Shocker, however, didn't last the night, succumbing to its injuries and falling down a cliff. Shocker will be remembered for a very short, but still effective, reign of terror. Josh, for his part, showed absolutely no pity for his fallen foe, and instead was using to preserve all his strength for his immune system to free him of the poison. From the monstrous to the deformed, to the tried and the true, the Velociraptor. These swift thieves are almost as iconic as a Tyrannosaurus Rex. They were pack hunters from late Cretaceous Mongolia, and just as lethal with their sharp frontal claws as they were with their jaws. And this raptor pack had been released right next to the poor defenceless parentless Herrerasauruses. But instead, the Velociraptor's first call of action was to hold their ground against the also nearby carnivores. On day 80, there was some excellent news, or terrible news if your name is Roman. Josh the Acrocanthosaurus had recovered from Shocker's blood poisoning and was once more on the mend. Josh would live to fight another day in this ecosystem. I checked in on our Allosaur pack, and one of them was looking rather bloody. The ecosystem itself was certainly turning rather violent now, so it wouldn't surprise me if it had got into a brawl somewhere. In fact, it wasn't the only Allosaurus who had been targeted. The new Velociraptor pack had set their sights on an ambitious first meal and started pouncing and clawing at their selected Allosaur. The first raptor got hauled off, but its partner did not relent, and instead managed to do what the Utahraptors could not, and take down an Allosaurus. They then tucked into a well-deserved and hefty feast. The latest additions to our ecosystem have been very carnivore heavy lately, so it was time to rectify that. Introducing the Parasaurolophus. This North American hadrosaur was a gentle giant, recognisable by its long curving head crest, which could be used for either communication or display. Also arriving was a graceful yet tough Ankylodocus. As its name suggested, it was a hybrid of the Ankylosaurus and the Diplodocus. Despite their threatening and dangerous club tails, these guys would pose no threat to their fellow herbivores, or in fact actually to their carnivores, as they were peace lovers. The ecosystem was also graced by the arrival of some more microscopic baby compies, who seemed to be doing rather well for themselves. At Sukomimus Lake in the pouring rain, the crocodile mimics had an uninvited guest in their territory, Marshall the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Despite tanking the first bite, the Sukomimus could do nothing when the Rex grabbed it by its snout and then performed a devastating neck bite. Marshall walked away with only a minor sprain, and the Sukomimus' lake had now been taken over by both Tyrannosaurus Rexes. They gave one single ultimatum: the Sukos could either relocate or perish. The rain had stopped now, and our new Ankylodocuses were bonding, getting so close to each other that they were practically inside each other. Back with our Rexes, they were enjoying the tasty water of their newly claimed lake. One Sukomimus had not taken too kindly to their new meat-eating overlords and tried to challenge them. The fight, however, did not go its way. It did manage to tank 2 bites from the powerful Rex jaws, but ultimately fled from this fight, only to impeccably try and fight the other one. To its credit, it did manage to land a hit on the Rex, whom I'm not sure even noticed, before deciding to run away again. On low health and suffering from internal bleeding, its odds of survival were near impossible. Back over in the meadows, and now Josh had fully recovered, he attempted once more to challenge his mate to reclaim leadership status amongst them. After some bites and a bulking body slam, he was once again unsuccessful in his bid. This was now the 3rd humiliating loss that Josh had suffered against his mate. As we entered the final 15 days of our ecosystem, a lone Ornithomimus was just minding its own business and pecking at some small plants. Quite frankly, I couldn't believe that one of these species was still alive, as I'd actually thought they'd gone extinct ages ago. For that reason, I decided to name it Unbelievable. Over at Sukomimus Lake, or is it Rex Lake at this point, a baby Sukomimus was trying to sleep, but got interrupted by one of the Rexes. The baby stood up, told the Rex to pipe down, and then went back down to sleep, despite the Rex's roar. This absolute Chad was named Survivor, and it continued to assert its dominance by playing in the sand, and sleeping once more, right in front of the Rexes. It really doesn't seem to know the definition of fear. Elsewhere on the island, the Acrocanthosaurs were getting along with each other for once, and the Parasaurs were not happy with their environment, so more groundnut was added to appease them. One of the last carnivores to be added to the ecosystem was the Albertosaurus. Fossils of this medium-sized predator were found in Alberta, Canada, and they were very close relatives of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. It was likely that these Albertosaurs hunted hadrosaurs in pairs or in packs, but unfortunately for them, the only nearby food source was the pair of Ankylodocuses. A brawl between 2 small carnivores was taking place. A Velociraptor and Dilophosaurus were taking turns jumping on each other and taking bites when they could. The Dilophosaur left the scene, and the raptor roared in victory. Little did it know though that the Dilo had poisoned its bloodstream, likely slowly killing it. The carnivores in the ecosystem were continuing to do their thing. A Metriacanthosaur pulled off a flawless hunt and takedown of a Stygmoloch, while a Barionyx challenged a Triceratops in a bid to get its lake back. Upon seeing the true size and bulk though of the large herbivore, the piscivore thought better of it and ran with its tail between its legs. Survivor, the juvenile Sukomimus, was continuing to strut its stuff like it owned the place. It felt truly untouchable and would soon become an adult itself. The same, however, could not be said for its sibling, who was hunted down by Marshall, who must be getting fed up with all these babies around the place. Over in the Great Valley, the Stegosaurs were full of confidence, and their egos were becoming unbearable for the rest of the species in that biome. So it was time to introduce the Indoraptor. Given the terrifying name of Max, this genetically modified hybrid was built for stealth, intelligence, and lethal efficiency when taking down its prey. The Velociraptor that fought with the Dilophosaur had recovered from the poison attack somehow, and was now fighting with its pack leader in an attempt to usurp it and become the pack leader itself. It pounced on its leader, but seemed to lose confidence after a body slam, causing it to run away in a failed attempt at gaining power. Following his spree of baby murdering, Marshall decided to leave Sukomimus Lake and go on a leisurely stroll around the ecosystem, particularly liking the shade that the nearby escarpment provided. The last living Ankylosaur was meandering around in the grasslands. Unfortunately, its mate had been killed earlier when challenging a Stegosaurus, and unfortunately this species had been a bit of a disappointment in its ecosystem, hence the name that I gave the surviving one. Orphan the Barionyx was now living a life of solitude, but was still content enough with its lot, enjoying some rest in the sun. Max wasted no time in challenging the biggest carnivore it could find, Rosie the Giganotosaurus, to a fight. No fight ended up taking place though, as Rosie took one look at Max and decided better of it. But a fight did take place though between two medium carnivores, a Carnotaurus and an Allosaurus. Both of these predators had separated from their packs to take part in this duel. The Carno struck first, and after a couple of body slams, where it was inconclusive who came out on top, it was the Allosaur who walked away, leaving the horned theropod to shout in success. Following her poor showing against Max, Rosie did redeem herself slightly by pulling off a physics-denying kill on a Coryphosaurus. Well done to Rosie. Sue the Tyrannosaur remained on watch at Sukomimus Lake, while Marshall went on his stroll. She noticed an Ankylodocus wandering too close, and went for it, undeterred by the heavily armoured sauropod. Frustrated by his lack of progress in initiating fights, Max went on an absolute murdering spree in the Great Valley, first pouncing on and brutally ending the life of a Stygmoloch, then chasing and leaping onto a second Stygny in the lake. That was a pretty impressive jump, it has to be said from Max. But Max wasn't the only carnivore on such a spree. One of the Carnosaurs had clearly been busy, taking a deserved drink from the lake, standing near the corpse of a Barionyx. It was wounded but surviving, and it had earned the name Carey. But as we reached the end of day 90, I decided that Max simply wasn't cutting it in terms of terror and ferocity. I introduced a dinosaur that needs no introduction really. This is the Indominus Rex, a mix of T-Rex, Velociraptor and a series of other species, equipped with a powerful jaw, strong claws and the ability to camouflage. It was going to be a serious weapon in this ecosystem. I named it Charlie, and it immediately got to work by claiming the alpha position of the Velociraptor pack, who were more than happy to fall in line. Marshall had ended his long walk by hunting and successfully killing the last Ornithomimus. It had been a fantastic effort from Unbelievable, but unfortunately the Ornithomimus was now officially extinct. Some unfortunate news to share with you though later that day was that Meme Machine, the Utahraptor slayer, was found dead on the morning of day 92. No clear cause of the death could be determined, but I am rather suspicious of this pair of Carnotaurs in the distance. Rosie was continuing to redeem herself by performing yet another Hadrosaur kill that defied the laws of space and time. A quick check at her stats showed that she actually has 3 kills, but that isn't even half the amount that Josh has. She still has some catching up to do. I took a break from the constant violence to have a look at the Tyrannosaurus Rex roaring into the distance while standing in a body of water. What an absolutely majestic shot this is. Back to the violence now, and I found disappointment the Ankylosaurus had been killed in a fight with Marshall. Missing this fight was almost as disappointing as the Ankylosaurs were in this ecosystem, as they were now, once again, extinct. And on the subject of extinction, Orphan, the last surviving Barionyx, had engaged in a fight with a Triceratops. The lone piscivore would need to be extremely cautious here if he was to survive, and Orphan did not get off to a good start, taking the Trike's horn straight on and looking very much worse for wear as a result. Orphan could do nothing as the Triceratops charged again, and this strike proved fatal, as Orphan collapsed in the water. Can we please have a rest in peace Orphan in the comments below, as this Barionyx, after being abandoned as a child, did so well to survive this long. But in a battle of the titans, Marshall was now squaring up to Josh's mate. Marshall did get the first bite in before the two slammed their bodies together, an action that must have sent shockwaves throughout the entire island. A second body slam followed before Josh's mate walked away. She may have the dominance over Josh, but she still had a long way to go to be on level terms with a T-Rex. Always quick to help his mate, even though she does bully him all the time, Josh showed his loyalty by running straight over, to comfort her after a heavy defeat. He then escorted her across the biome to the nearest meat feeder they could find, and they ate together. Perhaps there was still hope that Josh could win her over. Marshall, like his partner Sue, also took advantage of the excellent scenery to stand in the middle of the lake and roar at absolutely nothing in particular, but did give us a fantastic shot. Also visiting a lake was Charlie, the Indominus Rex, who had been underwhelmingly quiet so far, but I'm sure his time would come. A carnivore had spotted it from across the pond and foolishly decided to challenge Charlie to a duel, evidently showing the brains of a cartoon starfish by doing so. Charlie accepted the challenge, of course, and the two fought. As expected, Charlie got the first bite in, quickly followed by the second. The carnivore, to its credit, did manage to land a bite of its own in, but its triumph was short-lived, as Charlie grabbed it by the neck and shoved it to the ground, brutally biting at it to end its life. Play stupid games and win stupid prizes, as the carnivore found out, and Charlie got its first meaningful kill. In classic Indominus fashion, he celebrated by resting next to his victim. Not wanting to be overshadowed, and still proving it has worth in the ecosystem, Max cleanly and efficiently took down a Coryphosaur, taking his total kill count up to 6 on this island. An impressive number considering he hadn't been here all that long. The Ankylodocus that had ventured too close to the Tyrannosaur territory had not learnt its lesson after all. I found it dead after it had been fatally wounded by Sue. After taking out all the easy kills in the Great Valley, Max was finally doing what he was brought in to do, to humble the Stegosaurs. And he immediately did his job. The peanut-brained herbivore only needed one look at the hybrid to know he was in a bad place, and ran off. Still wanting a kill, however, Max changed his target to a Coryphosaur, who had the unfortunate fate of being Max's 7th kill of the ecosystem so far. Looking to prove himself to his mate, Josh decided to take on a Triceratops. This initially looked like a poor decision on his end, as the trike immediately charged in, wounding the Acro. Josh again fell victim to the herbivore's horns, resulting in him having to run for his life from the armored herbivore. The Triceratops was unscathed and earned the name of Alpha. Josh received no permanent wounds other than a major hit to his pride, once more. On day 95, the most devastating storm yet hit the ecosystem. The storm was so strong that a tornado formed in its centre, and this terrifying force of nature would be enough to put every dinosaur into panic mode. Well, almost every dinosaur. Max seemed to be chilling, despite the devastation on the horizon. This Stegosaur, however, was certainly disturbed, so much that it would rather face Max than run towards a tornado. Max, however, certainly wasn't expecting to be challenged, and when he was hit by the Thagomizer that seemingly came from nowhere, he couldn't quite gather his bearings in time before the Stego swung again, putting the Indoraptor down for good. After killing the Indoraptor, there was no doubt that the Stegosaurs had certainly earned the title of the Alpha of the Great Valley. The storm was also affecting Marshall, who took his fear out on a poor helpless Albertosaurus. But the next day, the storm had calmed, and the tornado was gone, and eventually the rain stopped altogether. This was much the relief of many of the dinosaurs of the ecosystem, although this Albertosaurus was not relieved. In fact, it was dead. Josh's mate was still focusing on resting and recovering from the concussion, and it was entirely possible that they had no idea there was a storm in the first place. The Stegosaurs' already high ego was now through the roof, following their defeat of Max. They felt invincible, so much that the only threats to them were the Stegosaurs themselves. Infighting was taking place in the herd, as they whacked each other's skulls with their Thagomizers. Thankfully for their sake, the fight was over before anything that happened couldn't be undone. But it turned out that the Stegosaurs were not immortal after all. Not according to Charlie anyway, who managed to do what Max could not, and kill one of the arrogant beasts. Once again, Charlie rested after performing its kill, and didn't disturb itself to get up, despite Rosie's best efforts at antagonizing the hybrid. It seemed that species infighting had become contagious following the storm. This time it was the spitting Dilophosaurs going at one another. They jumped on each other and rolled in the sand, but dealt no long-lasting damage to one another. Rosie was eventually successful in her suicidal bid to get on Charlie's nerves, and the two fought. Charlie immediately demonstrated why that was a bad idea by striking first, causing serious damage to Rosie. Rosie thought she was all that after her scientifically impossible kills, but Charlie showed why you shouldn't poke the bear, shoving Rosie to the ground and performing a fatal neck bite. Continuing the theme of large theropods hunting each other, it was round 2 between Josh's mate and Marshall. This fight was brief, as once again ended with the T-Rex proving why it was truly the king of the dinosaurs. Josh's mate once again walked off injured, and time would tell whether she would be able to survive this. Still though, she was still strong enough to hold off Josh's sneaky attempts at asserting dominance over her once more. Josh, on the other hand, really needs to stop trying to undermine her. Before we go any further and enter the climax of this video, I did just want to remind you all to download Raid Shadow Legends using my link in the description. Thanks again to Raid for supporting the channel. But that was it, as our ecosystem had now hit day 100. Over the last 100 days, it has truly been an unforgettable journey through this ecosystem's life. In the Great Valley, Charlie continued his battle against the Stegosaurs, while his obedient Velociraptors trotted alongside. In the meadows, Josh was still trying to win over his mate, rather than successfully, and at Sukomimus Lake, the Sukomimuses battled to fight another day. Let me know what ecosystem you would like me to simulate next, and remember to use my link in the description to purchase Jurassic World Evolution 3 for yourselves. And then, why not watch the video YouTube has on your screen right now? They think you will love it. Have a great rest of your day, everyone, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye for now.